Looking at problem 231, it deals with preprocessing, which is called Jeonkyori in Korean. This problem asks you to choose the option that best describes the function of preprocessing. Preprocessing can be considered as the step right before storing the image. The correct answer is choice D. The key phrase here is right before storing the data, which is most closely related to preprocessing as described here. Now let's move on and look at problem number 232. This question asks what effect occurs when you increase the dynamic range setting. Dynamic range is related to the contrast of an image. If you set this range wider, you will get that much more contrast. When this happens, similar colors may overlap, making it harder to distinguish between the two, which can result in reduced contrast. On the other hand, if you set a narrow dynamic range, the range of gray tones becomes narrower, but the contrasting areas become more distinct, resulting in increased contrast. The important point in this question is to remember well the effects that a wide and a narrow dynamic range have on an image. Since the question is asking about the wide dynamic range, you should choose option B. Now, let's look at question number 233 below. Since this isn't a difficult question, let's go straight to finding the answer. Yes, this question asks which component of the equipment system the TDC control is included in. These aspects can be considered as the role of the receiver. Among the functions of the receiver, TDC is related to compensation. Next, let's move on to question number 234. You can just take this question as a reference. It's asking about a typical value. When examining diagnostic ultrasound images, the typical range of duty factor is from 0.1 to 1%, as shown in option 2. You can just take this as a reference. Since this is not often asked in detail, you just need to check the approximate figures. Next, let's move on and look at question 235. According to the question, the examination is being performed on the gallbladder. During the examination, they want to perform preprocessing, and the question is asking which of the options below corresponds to a preprocessing function. Preprocessing refers to techniques that can be applied during the examination. From option A to option D, all of them are representative preprocessing techniques that can be used during the examination. On the other hand, post-processing techniques are performed during the process of stopping and saving the image, so the concept itself is different. Since the items from option A to option D are representative preprocessing steps, you should remember them through this question. Next, let's move on and look at question 236. This is the most basic concept. It's a question where you have to choose the option that is the opposite of cycle. The correct answer would be to select frequency in option B. Here, the term pulse repetition appears at the beginning. Although important terms like frequency and cycle that we know are included, you should understand that PRF and general frequency are different concepts. To explain further, PRF refers to the concept of counting how many times a pulse is repeated. Frequency, on the other hand, refers to the concept of frequency in megahertz that we are familiar with. So even though the same terms are used, the concepts they represent are different. Therefore, if you try to connect the two in the same context, there will be points that don't make sense, so please keep that in mind. Now let's move on and look at question number 237. The component of the equipment that determines or controls the PRF can be considered the pulsar. So, it is the pulsar that decides how many pulses to send. The number of times here can be seen as the PRF, and if the number increases, we say the PRF is high. If the number is low, we say the PRF is low. Frequency is different. For example, if it's 2 MHz, we say the frequency is low, and if it's 10 MHz, we say it's high. Once again, please take note of the difference between these two. Now let's look at question number 238 below. The question explains that the range equation or distance equation is used. This question asks what determines this distance equation. The distance equation is a method to measure depth by calculating the time it takes for a signal to travel back and forth from a certain position to a certain depth. So two key terms come up here. The two key terms are the go-return time, which is the time it takes to go back and forth, and the depth at which an object is located. The correct answer is depth, which is the relevant keyword in option D. Or, if there is a go-return time, that too can be considered a related keyword. Now, let's move on and look at question number 239. Yes, in the case of this question, there are some incorrect expressions, so I will skip solving it and move on. There are some parts that are misinterpreted as well. Usually, when decibels, dB, are mentioned like this, they often come out as multiples of 3 according to the 3 dB rule. Normally, it should be 12 decibels, but the fact that it's 10 decibels makes the calculation itself a bit ambiguous. Also, even when looking at the explanation, there aren't any particular features, so I will skip this question as well. Now, let's look at question number 240. For this question as well, you just need to understand the content for reference. It is asking about the purpose of using preamplification when a signal is generated in a transducer. This isn't a pattern that appears frequently. The fact that preamplification is mentioned means, first and foremost, you should remember that it is used to reduce noise. If you just check these 2 points carefully, I can say that you won't have much difficulty solving the problem. First, the correct answer would be choice B. By applying this preamplification, the echo voltage is increased. You can think of it as preventing noise from entering through the cable in advance. To summarize once again, the first and most important purpose of using preamplification here is to reduce noise. So, by increasing the voltage, it is used to reduce noise entering through the cable in advance. Just remember this related concept.